Financial fragility. Most American households did slightly better economically in 2015 than 2014, according to a recent survey by the Federal Reserve. 69% said they were living comfortably or doing okay, up from 65%. But 31% said they were either struggling to get by or just getting by, a figure that includes millions of middle-class Americans. In fact, it can be surprising to learn just which Americans continue to struggle. Judy Woodruff has the latest in our series with The Atlantic.
By almost any measure, Neil Gabler has led a successful life. He's published respected biographies of Walt Disney, Barbra Streisand, and Walter Winchell, written for leading newspapers and magazines, taught at prestigious universities. He's a husband and the father of 2 daughters, now launched in their own successful careers. He lives in New York's Long Island enclave, the Hamptons, a place of natural beauty and mecca for wealth and celebrity. And yet, for years, Neil Gabler harbored a dark secret.
It's very difficult. I'll tell you what's really been difficult on is my wife.
Being the writer that he is, Gabler decided to come to terms with his secret by writing about it.
I never write about myself, so I didn't embark on this project saying, oh gosh, I can't wait to write about my own failures, which is basically what the article is about. But really the spring of this piece was reading a news item about the Federal Reserve Household Economic Survey, in which they asked the question, if you had a $400 emergency, could you meet that emergency? And 47% of the respondents said that they couldn't meet that emergency without either having to borrow money or to sell something. And I read that item and I said to myself, well, who knew? But of course I knew.
Who knew? Everybody who gets paid by the hour knew. That's who knew. What up, guys? Total Control 871 chiming in with the next edition of our financial report. Okay, I've stumbled across a couple of really interesting videos. The video that we're looking at right now, it's from PBS. It's a couple years old, 2016. Though, I'm going to show you just how little things actually change in the world and how the conundrum of being locked in a box, it's been ongoing a lot longer than you think. Like I say, I don't dump everything at Donald Trump's feet. This poverty conundrum, this caste system, because it's not a problem, okay? A problem seems to suggest that something is a standalone complex. One might even call a syndrome a collection of problems. America's economic system, its class system, this is something that is far more reaching than you will ever truly understand. Great pains are taken to create and preserve it. When you have persons such as myself who rail against the established norms, who advocate divestment from big everything, it tends to invoke the ire of a lot of people, as we are seeing. Hold on, I want to take us to our next portion here. I just want to show you the next, because I'll post this obviously like I always do down below, where you can watch the entire segment. Let's take a look at our author and see where our author, who our East Hampton the entire thing, it's rather insulting. I'm sorry. He's trying to take his economic downturn and compare it to people like me, many of you. He goes on to talk about this in the thing about how there are 2 different types of Hamptons people. Okay, I get maybe some are probably more wealthy than others, fine, but I'm sorry, you're never going to convince me that because you live in the Hamptons year-round, that somehow makes you on par with me, a man who lives in a tent year-round. Let's take a closer look at some of at our poor, impoverished writers' financial choices, shall we?
Perhaps I can help those people who feel shamed and embarrassed and humiliated, and show them, look it, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to expose all of my faults, all of my mistakes, all of my failures. You're not alone.
What do you say, buddy? How's everything?
Hanging in there, hanging in there.
Gabler knew he wasn't alone even before.
Ooh, baby. Look at that spread. Oh my, custom meats. Oh, come on, let's get in on this. Well, something tells me, something tells me he won't be shopping. Yeah, these are my meats. These are my custom meats. Show me your meat. Yeah. And this person literally wants to put themselves on par with the poor, with the proletariat. You laugh to keep from crying. It really is sad. This man is in a totally primo butcher shop. When he talks about $400, that's probably his, what, your food bill for maybe half the week? Or the week, maybe? You know, hope I'm not muffling the mic, because I sometimes will muffle the mic when I hold it in this hand. Yeah, so this guy, he's clearly in the midst of his economic downturn. Okay, I get it, because later in the video, we learned that he is suffering a financial loss. No question about that. I'm not arguing that. But we are seeing what this man continues to do while in the midst of it. Let's take a closer look.
Before writing the article, due to weekly chats with Brian Brunges, an East Hampton butcher.
Brian the Butcher is my friend. He's a wonderful, easy guy to talk to. And gradually, over time, we talk about our financial situation. Very, very rare, particularly among men. And I remember one day, especially, this was one of those periods where I didn't have the $400. And unfortunately, they come all too frequently. And he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I'm in the same situation. I've got this expense and that expense. If anybody tells you that they're sailing through, they're lying.
Everybody struggles. I have a child with autism. He was diagnosed 20 years ago. Okay. My wife had to stop working.
When we thought of looking at the capacity of families to bear a shock, to face a shock.
Anne Maria Lusardi is an economist at George Washington University.
And the way we formulated the question is, how confident are you that you could come up with $2,000 if an unexpected need arose within the next month?
Yeah,
And
real
what we
poor
found
people
is
don't even
40%
earn $2,000 in
of
30
families
days.
could not come up with $2,000 in 30 days. So it's important to recognize that the financial fragility is just so widespread.
The main reason is that we've had a long period of wage stagnation in this country, even going further back, even to the mid-1970s. So in the face of stagnating incomes, what did families do? Well, for a while they did accumulate wealth, and this was buoyed by the housing price boom of going forward until 2006, and then suddenly the housing market collapsed, and so did net worth.
How much of what you would describe as your financial condition is due to decisions that Neil Gabler made, and how much of it is due to outside circumstances beyond your control?
That's a great question, and I want to take responsibility. I don't want to put everything off on these larger financial forces. I chose to become a writer. This is the most financially perilous profession that one can possibly imagine, except possibly being an actor. I chose to live in New York City.
I'm going to show you guys something.
Possibly being an actor. I chose to become a writer. I don't want to put everything off on these larger financial forces. I chose to become I don't want to put everything off on these larger financial forces.
It is said in FBI psychological profiling, when people touch their nose, they're lying. I have no idea how much truth that is, but we're going to talk some more.
I chose to become a writer. This is the most financially perilous profession that one can possibly imagine, except possibly being an actor. I chose to live in New York City because I thought I needed to be close to magazines and publishers that I needed for my writing career. So I did that. And New York is expensive. I chose to have 2 children. Children are expensive. I made the choice to send them to expensive colleges. So those were all choices that I made that had serious financial consequences. But again, those choices were what I call life.
So many young people today are told, find your passion and follow it. It sounds like that's what you did.
That's exactly what I did. I followed my bliss, and I'm happy I did. So, I accept responsibility. On the other hand, since roughly half of Americans are suffering the same sort of financial fragility I'm in, we can't say that they're all imbeciles.
Same financial fragility as you? You've got a house in the Hamptons, okay? I've got a tent in the fucking woods. Shit. I got a tent in the fucking woods where I'm battling mold. Alright? Spare me your so-called fragility. We're going to be talking about that American dream, the happiness that he spoke of. I don't want to waste too much time. I want to show you some other stuff.
I bought this house. I could afford it. It wasn't exorbitantly expensive. I was able to afford it for a very long time. This is all cedar, but you can see how many shingles are missing here.
Right. These days, though, the house has fallen into disrepair. It's in desperate need of a new roof. Floorboards are rotting. It has not seen fresh paint in many years.
If I had $100,000, I could
get all this done.
I could probably get it done.
Yeah. Did you ever think about moving to a less expensive part of the country?
We did, and we've talked about that. But here's the catch-22 of that. If we were, once the recession hit, the house lost its value, as it did for most Americans. So now the house is deteriorating, it's lost its value. So if I had the resources to fix up the house to sell it, I wouldn't need to sell it. That's the catch-22. I am a financial illiterate, and financial illiterates pay a heavy price for their financial illiteracy.
Gabler is not using the term financial illiteracy loosely. It's a phenomenon economists say is a key factor in the current fragility of the middle class.
We measure financial literacy by looking at basic financial knowledge. We are experiencing much more complex financial markets, much more complex financial products than in the past. And the knowledge of people has not kept up.
Half of America will have to compromise on their dreams. There's one statistic that I cite in the piece from a USA Today survey, which I think is fascinating. And that survey determined that a middle-class existence in America would cost $130,000
A year.
a year. The median income in America is somewhere around $50,000. So, a middle-class existence.
Don't we know it? Okay. Obviously, I'm ticked at the guy for equating himself, or putting himself into, a person like myself's position. But, the financial literacy thing, that's important to think about. That speaks directly to my financial choices that I made when I got my disability back payment. I hope I'm not muffling any mics here when I hold the phone in this hand. Like I said, when I got my back payment, I was able to purchase this bicycle, which ultimately cost about $4,000. Oh, by the way, I figured out what the hell was going on with my bicycle seat while I was rupturing the gel. This motherfucker. I completely forgot that DEET decomposes silicone, what the seat's made out of. When I'm in this enclosed domicile, in this small enclosure, as I'm hitting myself off, it all particulates in the air, just like how I gave the safety speech about not lighting your camp stove too soon after hitting yourself off of DEET, because you could, the DEET that I spray, it's breaking down the silicone on the seat. Anyway, so as I even testified in the Jewish Family Services unlawful prosecution video, or in the the trial, should I say, I told Judge Podolnik that when I got my money, I had to be very, very careful with how I spent that money. I considered, they had tents, like we got this tent here. Although this tent, it is starting to get eaten up by mold, it only costs $50. Remember that. There is a tent, probably the tippity top of the tents is Arctic Oven. I think the whole package deal with their proprietary wood burning stove and the footprint and the base tar, and you could end up spending about $5,000 on that tent. For their larger tent. I considered it. I could have purchased it, but I also understood that because I am in the woods, if somebody were to vandalize your tent, that's thousands of dollars gone that you're never going to get back. So I decided against that, and that turned out to be a very prudent choice, because my first tent did indeed get vandalized. The bicycle, true, cost $4,000, infinitely less than a new car, infinitely less than a good used car. And of course, there is no, other than the annual maintenance and things like that, cleaning agents, which I need to do. I need to clean this bike. There is no gas tank. There is no registration. There is no plating. There is no all of these albatross that go around your neck. This man did not think when he was in his golden era, okay? I understood. See, I didn't kid myself. A lot of people will live for today. A lot of that mentality goes on. We saw him in his expensive butcher shop. Hey, I would love to pick up the phone right now and call JoJo's and order shrimp parmesan dinner, and with tip that'd be like $30 fucking. That ain't happening, okay? That ain't happening. When I was working and employed and was getting a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, then I could do something like that. And even then, it was like maybe once or twice a month. But And although it wasn't that expensive either, it was more like $20 with tip because prices have gone up. But anyway, we see that this man lived above his means. Also, I will say, before his house fell into disrepair, he should have taken action. But of course, it was his continuity. This is his home. See, people don't like to give up their homes, as evidenced in our thumbnail. In case you don't know who that is Edith Beale. Yes, of the Bouviers, Jackie O's relatives. And yes, that house, Grey Gardens. The documentary is gripping, and the 2005-6 remake movie, that movie was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Drew Barrymore redeemed herself. I believe it was hold on. Jessica Lange. Jessica Lange, her performance was to be expected, okay? And it was an incredible performance, but I really got to give it to Drew Barrymore. She redeemed herself. She showed that she could do a lot more than just simply ditzy romantic comedies. The movie was gripping, absolutely gripping. And our thumbnail is of the real Edith Jr. A very gripping. I'll put a link down to the documentary series too. Grey Gardens, the Hamptons. Grey Gardens is in the Hamptons, and we saw how their home fell into disrepair, and that's what I'm talking about here. Preventative measures, thinking ahead, thinking very much far ahead. It is why I did not get into the hamster wheel. This man, Mr. What was it, Gabler? Am I saying his last name right? This man fell into an all too common trap. We also heard how he put his daughters extremely expensive schools. It is said that they have successful careers. When you invest in your children, you should expect to get something back on that investment. Is there a reason why your children aren't helping you bring your home up to an acceptable value where you can sell it and downsize, okay? Because quite literally, what he's saying right now, it isn't quite the same thing as what I talk about being locked in a box. But because of his financial choices, because he wants to continue seeing Brian the Butcher and the gourmet meats and the gourmet restaurants and the gourmet supermarkets, okay? Because he wants to continue living that life, his world is going to continue to recede in on him. And unfortunately, I predict that he will eventually end up in a scenario not too dissimilar to Grey Gardens. If he doesn't sell, if he doesn't upgrade and sell, he should have done that. My collection. Just like how I did not switch to a cheaper storage unit, without getting into a whole big back thing. I think I kept that collection in non-climate control for about, I want to say, 6 months. And it began to have a very noticeable effect on the minting. The rapid temperature changes, the moisture, condensation. It has an effect, okay? And you're going to damage the value of your investment. So this man should have kept up with his investment, his home, and he did not. And now he's at a point where he procrastinated so long that post housing market bubble burst, collapse, he's now fucked. He is now locked in his very expensive box. It's a big box. It's an expensive box. But nevertheless, he's locked in that bitch, okay? This is why I did not get into an apartment. You're going to end up being locked in a box. You can't do anything with your life. He goes on to talk about dreams, how Americans have to sacrifice their dreams. Very much indeed true. I could so segue from that part that he said right there. That speaks to the Casey Neistats and the vacationer YouTubers. Okay, even if they're not actually on a vacation, but every time you see them go jetting off, jaunting off, having a wonderful time, that's what's being used as a pacifier for you who had to sacrifice your dreams. You don't get to have a life. You get to watch other people have a life. How long is that going to hold you? How long is that going to sate you, keep you content? You know? So yeah, this guy, let me check my time, 26. This guy is not me, okay? He might be locked in a box, but he's not me. This guy didn't think his future choices far enough ahead. You should be getting something back on your investment of your children. They should be helping you with your property. They are not. Why? If I had to hazard a guess, I would probably say that they themselves, that's what you paid for. That's what your fancy education paid for. It hypno-mind fucks the next generation. You have this degree, okay? You're now worth X amount, and you're going to be paid X amount, and because you have that much money, you're now expected to get into the next hamster wheel, the next generation of hamster wheels. So they're probably entrenched themselves. That's where I'm going with that. His children are probably entrenched with a bunch of financials of their own, which they might not be able to help, although I can't say for sure. In none of that, we didn't see any kind of numbers being flashed as to Neil, as to what he spends and what his income is and any of that. But like I say, this is not a future that I want for myself, where you're locked in a box. This man, he lived beyond his means. Okay, he wanted to live a particular lifestyle, and when his income could no longer maintain that, he found himself trapped, you know, and I have no idea what he's going to do, because he is right, the housing market is fucked, and of course that begins to speak toward conceptual wealth. Who controls real estate? Who controls the banks? Who controls your print media, the magazines that you wanted to work for and be close to, and publications? Who controls all these things? Who owns it all? Who controls it all? Who assigns the value to your home? Okay? Just saying. Alright guys, check out all the links below, and like I say, stay woke and question your reality. Also, if you guys have it, break off a few bucks. The GoFundMe could use a little action. For all my donors who have donated thus far, thank you very much. You've already done more than your part. You guys out there on the sidelines sitting, if you like the financial reports, if you like the homeless living videos, these things can continue with the correct amount of financing. And I say that to be specific, that if you help me conquer the unlawful charges that I have to face in court, then so much more could happen. You know, I'm very cautious with my, what time have I got here? 29. I'm very cautious with my optimism. If I could just clear these hurdles, then I could definitely start to live a life. I've given up the hopes for apartment and homes. I'll know I'll never have it. I have resigned myself to living alone in the woods, homeless, bushcraft, all this stuff. Real bushcraft. Not even fancy sponsored shit. If you guys want to see it, if you guys want to something that's a bit more down to earth type of homeless living and homeless hacks, then please break off a few bucks and stick it in the old GoFundMe. Total Control 871.